G'day, hi and welcome. Okay, viewers discretion advised. If you do not have your drool buckets out, you might want to get them now. So, ooh, look at that. Alright, this is my take two in making this video. Try to get comfortable here on the floor. See how lazy I can get. Oh, without trashing the place. Okay, what I want to talk about is more going to be aimed towards beginners. Get away from my smelly shoes. Lying on cables. What I want to talk about is what kind of guitars you should start with and some buying tips, okay, for beginners and stuff like that. So first off, okay, what we got here is two different types of guitars. We obviously have a Jackson Flying V and a Gibson SG61 reissue, 2007 production. And I bought this guitar in 2009. I bought this guitar about 2 years ago, maybe? I forget. There was a method behind buying this cheap guitar. Now, to give you an idea, I've owned over 40 guitars in my life. Or around 40. So, I've been trying to buy a guitar for every year I've been alive. So, I got a couple more guitars to buy to catch up. You know, you got to keep things balanced, right? But here's what I learned over the years. I started off, like most people, with a very inexpensive guitar. I bought I had a whole bunch of guitars like that first. After about a year playing guitars like that, some of them I found in the garbage and fixed them up, and this one I'll be fixing up for my nephew. It's in good condition, it just needs strings, that's all. The bridge is actually inside the guitar, so. But the thing is that when I first started playing, you don't know what you want. You know what you like aesthetically, so some people are going to like, oddball looking guitars. I mean, this thing is literally the same size as my nephew. it's ridiculously long. The thing's like 4 feet long. I don't know how long it is. It's pretty long. This here's, again, it's an unorthodox shape. Most people are going to have like some sort of Strat body style guitar, but not everybody can afford Gibson or Fender, and not everybody wants Gibson or Fender. And not everybody knows that they don't want Gibson or Fender in the beginning. Now, let me tell you what happened with me. Just from my experience, so maybe it'll help you guys, maybe it won't. Is I started off with a 1968 Harmony Rocket as my first electric guitar. Now, this was a good guitar. There was nothing wrong with it. It was a thick Chuck Berry, like an ES335 style guitar. It had 3 pickups. It was a hollow body with the big F-holes. It had like a really narrow tapered neck. Like a Rickenbacker, definitely not a metalhead guitar. And of course, I was playing as much rock and metal on it as I could, but I was limited by that guitar because it wasn't really meant for that stuff. It was meant for something else. So then I got my second guitar, which my sister now has, which was a TCM Explorer, which was at the time my mom and dad bought it for me. For my birthday. It was the only guitar they ever bought for me, not because they couldn't afford guitars, but they knew I was so picky when it came to guitars that anything I would, they said, okay, here's what we're going to do. Here's the budget. You go pick something out. Because, I remember my mom was probing me, what kind of guitar do you like? And and then I'd go off and I just, start talking guitar nerd, and then, their eyes would just glaze over. They're like, what the hell is this kid talking about? Like that type of thing. So it's just like, it's just easier to let him pick it, because we're going to pick the wrong thing no matter what. So I picked up this TCM Explorer guitar, which was really cool. I always wanted a Flying V. There was a TCM Flying V sitting there. It was $150, but there was something really severely wrong with it. It just did not play at all. It wasn't that it was just out of tune. It was... there was something wrong with it. It was new in the shop, but at $150, sometimes you get guitars like that, right? They were like those Sears guitars you got years ago, which the first time you played them, you thought they were the coolest things until you played a better guitar. And once you play a better guitar, then you realize how cheap those guitars were, those plywood body guitars. But that TCM Explorer actually wasn't half-assed bad for what it was. I ended up putting some hot rod pickups in there, and it actually didn't sound too bad, but it didn't stay in tune well. It had a whammy bar on it, but it didn't wasn't a locking system or like that. So again, you could get by with it, but it wouldn't stay in tune properly. So I ended up jamming up the tremolo on it so that the bridge would be more like a fixed bridge, and You know, it was a rough guitar. You know, the frets were sharp on the side, but it'd be okay gigging guitar. But it was just like the action was never, you know, you could never get you could get the intonation pretty close. It was pretty good, but you could just never get it refined, right? But it was a fun guitar, and I learned a lot on it. And obviously, it could take volume, which the hollow body couldn't on my little trainer amp. You know, like this thing, you know, it was a pretty heavy guitar. You know, the plywood body guitar. It was a good looking guitar. It still is. I mean, but it was limited. I couldn't do a lot, but it was a good jam night guitar. It was a good learning guitar. And once I got past that phase where, yes, I know I'm going to stick with it, I started looking for the super guitar, which at the time, because my biggest, I was a huge fan of, well, still am, but was a huge fan of AC/DC, obviously. And the SG61 reissue, or the SG61 was a guitar I liked. But at the time, what was out when I was a teenager was the SG62 reissue, which was a little bit different. Didn't quite have the large headstock like that one, and so that was my dream guitar, and that's what I wanted. And I got to play one, and I was just like, wow, that's excellent. But when I walked into the guitar shop, I had worked all summer to buy a professional guitar, and at 15 years old, you're 13 years old or 14 years old, however old I was at the time, your whole concept of having that much money to spend, I don't remember how much, but it was about 2 years of saving of working summer jobs, right? 2 years of savings to buy a really good guitar. And your concept is, I'm only ever going to be able to afford one good guitar in my life, and that's it. I'll never be able to buy another one again, so make it count, right? And I was just about to grab the SG62 off the wall. I mean, I'd played it a few times, so I knew what I was up against. But the guy at the guitar shop in Steve's Music, his name's Kevin. If you ever go in there, you'll know who he is. If you go into there, he's part of the furniture. He's been there, I think, since 2000 BC. He's been there for everybody. And he points out this guitar. He goes, "There's this guy called Steve Vai just coming out on the scene now, and he plays this." A version of this, and he pointed out an Ibanez RG750. I had never heard of one of those things before, and I was like, "Well, it's not really my style of guitar." He goes, "Well, here," he says, "don't knock it till you try it." You know what I mean? Because I was sold on the SG. That was the guitar I was going to buy, and that was it. And he wasn't trying to push the other guitar on me, but he was trying to. He goes, "Look, you could spend as much money in here as you want." He says, "But here, try this, try this, try this, try this, then try that, and compare it back and forth." So I'd pick up the SG. Okay, and I'd play it. And then I'd put the SG down, and I'd grab one of these RG750s. I grabbed the Kramer Beretta. I grabbed, I think, a Kramer Night Swan. All the classic 80s metal guitars you could think of that you could grab. BC Riches, Warlocks, the Bitch guitar, the Ironbird. Played them all. Gibson Flying V. You name it all. I played them all because I had the budget that I could just start getting into. I played Les Pauls, I picked up all the Stratocasters, and he was really good because he brought out some headphones. He goes, "Here, plug this into the amp, listen to it." And what sold me on the Ibanez was the versatility of it. It was 5-way switching on it, the Wizard neck. I'd never played a guitar with a neck like that. It was just unbelievable. It was flat, it was wide, kind of like what this thing, the Flying V's like, but that Flying V is not quite as refined. But it was incredible. And I played two of them, and it was like these two things they were from another planet. The Gibson, as great as it was, the Gibson was kind of a bit of a one-trick pony. It didn't have the Floyd Rose, it only had 3-way switching, and stuff like that. And I still love the 62 reissue to this day, until I played the 61 reissue that came out about a year after, in the early 90s, or a year or two after. When it came out, that sold me on the 62 reissue, and I've lusted after it for years and years and years, but could never justify the money. So I bought this Ibanez. At the time was about $1,200 and some odd dollars, and it was the guitar that could do everything. Now, unfortunately, that guitar got stolen on me, but that guitar turned me off of cheap guitars. It was just like, okay, everybody's, "Wow, Reg, that's a lot of money for a guitar." Well, I don't know if it was or wasn't, because, by the time I got into bands, I started making a little money with them. I don't know if I've ever played enough to pay off that guitar, we'll just say. But even if I didn't, okay, I had that guitar for 4 or 5 years or whatever it was before it got stolen on me. And that guitar was just, you know, it was like, okay, yeah, I walk into a store, any guitar store, and I'll pick up any type of guitar, even guitars that I don't think I'll like. Because sometimes you get surprised by stuff, you know, like I say, you don't knock it till you try it. So I picked up that guitar, and it was so good that I always said, okay, well, my second guitar is going to be a 62 reissue. And I started saving up for it, but then they discontinued it, and the SG61 reissue came out. And I remember the first time I picked this guitar up, I was just like, wow, this thing just sounds great. It just plays so incredible. The neck wasn't quite the same as the Ibanez, but this was the perfect guitar for me. The neck was flat and wide, but not so flat that you couldn't really, you know, that you couldn't really dig into it. Not so wide that you know, you couldn't shred on it, but not. But it was wide enough that you could shred on it, but not so wide that you couldn't do chords on it. Where I find sometimes if you're doing like chorded stuff on this, it can be, it's great for shredding, but it is, sorry, I have to point with my foot here. But I find sometimes when you're doing chords on these flat, wide necks, they're a little bit, you know, you got to really stretch to do this stuff, so it makes it more difficult. Where this guitar just seemed to have the best blend. So then this became the benchmark guitar that I basically compare every guitar in the world to, is the 61 reissue. And what that does is, and there's a lot of things that I'm going to talk about here. I want to keep this a short video, but it's just not going to happen. But the thing is when you're picking out a guitar, what you're going to find with the cheap guitars is they just won't naturally do what the good ones will. Now, that said, this is a ridiculously expensive guitar. For what it is. And you could find great guitars well under $1,000. You can even find some incredible guitars for $500, but you really got to know what you're looking for. And for some people, the way I'll put it is, the more refined you play, the more refined your guitar is going to be. If you're just doing chords, any guitar will do. Pretty much. You know, then it's just a matter of, do you like a dark sounding pickup or a bright sounding pickup? Do you like single coils? Do you like humbuckers? Whatever it's going to be. But one thing you will find with a cheap guitar is that there's always a compromise. That it's like, wow, this guitar is so cool, it's so good, but it doesn't quite find the harmonics. With this guitar, if you're a little off on the harmonic, it'll still ring. This, if you're off it a little bit, it just does not ring. Now, a lot has to do with the Floyd Rose. That does kill a lot of sustain, floating bridges do. But not all of them do. There are some really good sounding you know, tremolo systems out there that actually may not quite get the sustain as a fixed bridge, but pretty close. The cheaper guitars don't. Mahogany body versus basswood body. Basswood basically has the tonal quality of a rotten tree stump. Now, there's people that will argue with me sometimes that, Reg, it doesn't matter what kind of wood it is, that's all a gimmick and stuff like that. If you can't hear the difference between the wood, don't worry about it. But if you're me, you hear the difference. This is why when you try a guitar, if you can go into a music shop and try the guitars with the headphones, the problem is how you test it. Do not test guitars with effects. You could test clean, you could test dirty, but do not test with effects, because effects will hide the actual natural tone of the guitar. First, you play the guitar unplugged. How does it sound? If you got a guitar that sounds good unplugged, it's going to sound great plugged in. Then it's a matter of whether you like the pickups or not. You can always change that later if you really want to. But even if you're getting at the, well, I'm going to buy a cheap guitar and I'm going to put better pickups in it, buy the next model up with the better pickups, you know. Unless you're after a very specific pickup or something like that. But what ends up happening is you buy a cheap guitar, okay, and then you buy another cheap guitar and another cheap guitar. Now you got 3 cheap guitars that would have probably, you know, maybe this, but whatever it is that you like. In the most, you can buy a professional guitar under $1,200. After $1,200, you're pretty much into materials, cosmetics, and name. There's really no reason for a guitar to be much more expensive than that. And that's just reality. You know, like you got gold plating on it, or you know, the name brand or the rarity of it or something like that. That'll, like, there's guitars out there that are, you know, Gibsons out there that are $6,000-$7,000. Okay, you're paying for the handcrafting, that stuff, or the limited edition run or whatever. There's no reason for a guitar to be that expensive. So realistically, if you're just after playability and sound quality, you can pick up something well well within $1,000. But for your first guitar, I would try to keep it under 500, 400 even. I mean, you could probably find a Jackson like this used for $200. I've seen them like $150 with the fixed bridge. And that is probably, I would probably say for your first guitar, until you learn how to play, stay away from the tremolo. The reason being is that unless you really, really insist on having it, it's learn how to tune your guitar by ear. Yes, you can use a tuner for the reference note, but then learn how to turn it by ear, because a lot of people use guitar tuners and their guitars are always a little bit out. And if you have to set up the action and stuff like that, every time you change the strings, you got to kind of retweak the action on a Floyd, even if you're getting the same gauge strings. Sometimes they're not exactly all the same, and you got to know how to tweak that stuff. So I'd wait till maybe your second guitar. But if you have to make it your first guitar, make it a cheap one. Make it a cheap one until you know you're going to stick with it. Let's say you've been playing for 2 years. And you know you're going to stick with it, and you're really progressing, and you're really into it, then okay, now you're starting to look, okay, well, now you need something better so that you can get more out of you. And what expensive guitars do, or not let me say expensive, but good quality guitars do, what they do for you is they take a lot of the workload away by just naturally being intuitive to play. Like this guitar, because of the shorter scale neck, harmonics are awesome on this. Anywhere you hit a harmonic, you're going to get a ring out of it. Even if you're slightly out, you're still on. With the long scale necks like this is 24 1/4. This is 25 1/2 scale. The longer scale guitars tend to be a little bit harder, less forgiving on that. But you get a different sound with them. You can get a bit more of a twangy sound, or you can get more of a whatever. Both have jumbo frets. That's kind of the standard for today. But maybe if you're a chording guy, go with a Telecaster with thin frets. Man, it gets a really nice juicy sound. But then if you want to shred, it's a little bit buzzy. The Gibson, the finished frets on that, the dressed frets on that, every fret is perfect. Like they don't buzz. The cheaper guitars, they tend to buzz a little more, but you can live with it. The other thing about the cheap guitars is that if you're doing jam nights, that's the main reason. This was a jam night guitar, because I know what happens to guitars when you take them on stage a lot. If it's your favorite guitar, never take it to the stage. Never take it to the stage because you're gonna ruin it. This guitar has a warped neck on it, probably from sitting under hot lamps somewhere in the, in a hot bar, and it ruins them. This guitar, it's still pretty good. Like it still plays pretty amazing, but the neck is slightly more. Mind you, it is a lot. These guitars are known for doing that because of their thin necks and the thin heel joint on them. They tend to warp a bit, but it's still an amazing, incredible guitar. I was playing it today with the headphones on through that, and it's just, whether you play this thing plugged in or in headphones or whatever, or record with it, it's just stellar sound. So you'd say, but that's so much money. Yeah, but that's so much money so many years ago. I still have it. I won't part with it. This is the guitar I'm taking into the casket with me. If I can't have it, I'm going to burn it. You know what I mean? If I can't have it, nobody can. This is my benchmark guitar. This is my dream guitar. Believe it or not, this is my dream guitar. This is the guitar that I default back to all the time, no matter what. If you're lucky enough to find a guitar that you like that much, it might not be extravagant for somebody else, but you might like it that much. It's probably because you can play it and get out of it what you want to get out of it without too many compromises. There's always a compromise somewhere. And this thing, again, there is no such thing as a perfect guitar. But there's a lot more compromises I have to live with this. Although this is a great guitar, it's a lot of fun. Great shredding guitar, good jam night guitar. It's a lot of fun, whatever. And it looks cool. And it's cheap. So that's a good intermediate guitar. I mean, this is a great starter guitar, but if you don't stick with it, that's $400 plus tax. It's a lot of money to waste for something that's going to sit there and you're never going to use again. So maybe buy used, get one $200 or whatever. If you never touch it again, it's $200, right? But if you're playing live and stuff like that, this is a guitar that's, even if it doesn't hold up live, I mean, you're going to get your money's worth out of it very easy on, and it sounds good enough. If you play well, people more are going to notice how well you play than what you're playing. Most people can't distinguish the tonal difference between that and that. They usually can't. But what usually happens is when you play something that's really good, even if they're different guitars, it's the quality of the guitar that really makes the difference. So like this and my SG3 sitting over there in the corner, that guitar plays incredible as well. But yeah, this one, it just, everything works for me on this one, that I like it so much. This one, what I love about it is that it's the guitar that I don't have to care about as much. You know, I don't have to be worried about it as much. It's a jam night guitar. It's a workhorse guitar. It's a guitar that its fate is going to be probably something horrible of wear and tear. It's going to be worn out. The frets are going to get worn out. The fingerboard's going to get worn out. The neck's going to be warped in it after maybe 50 gigs or whatever. And I've lost a lot of guitars like that. Not lost, but like, you know, ruined a lot of guitars like that. So when you're buying a good guitar, a really good guitar, maybe you have that one really good guitar that you're just never going to part with. So whatever you pay for it really is kind of, I'm not trying to justify spending more money than you need to. What I'm saying is hunt down guitars. Try everything. Try them unplugged first. Play them clean. Play them dirty. No effects. I know everybody wants to hear, well, what's my guitar going to be like with effects? You do the effects last because you want to hear the natural sound of that guitar, but more importantly, you want to know how it naturally plays. For harmonics, for intonation, all that stuff. You don't want to mask that because what might sound great at the guitar shop, okay, you get home and you plug it into your amp and it just doesn't sound the same at all. I mean, the best test is to play through your own rig. I get that, but not everybody, you know, can do that. And you usually can't bring your rig to a music store and play it and whatever. Sometimes you can. I mean, if you're spending enough money, sometimes it'll accommodate you. But for most box stores, they'll be like, no, just play through our stuff. We got one here, don't worry. Yeah, just play through our... try the same guitar through different types of amps. I've played this through probably about 50 different types of amps. I haven't owned 50 types of amps. And that's something else a lot of people don't realize. They think they need a new guitar when, if you want to really change your tone, change your amp. Amp makes more of a difference in your guitar sound than probably the guitar itself. Believe it or not. You know, within reason. Within reason. So for beginners, I would really say don't just buy cheap guitar after cheap guitar. Buy one cheap guitar, learn on that guitar, make sure it's a guitar that plays well. Nice thing now is you can get, there are no bad guitars out there really. I mean, there are some that are pretty bad, but I remember years ago, like some of the cheap guitars were so bad that they were unplayable. The action was so high you'd end up getting tendinitis. Stuff like that. But now you can get guitars that play so well, like this thing plays itself. I mean, it's not perfect. The sustain isn't perfect. The pickups aren't perfect, but you get a good enough sound out of it. This would be a great student guitar for somebody, even if it's not, not cheap, but the formula is good. Playability should be the first thing you look for in a beginning guitar, because if you got to live with it for a couple of years until you can save up for something better. But then when you find your dream guitar, when you go into a guitar shop, try every make and model, grade level that you can try. Try the cheap stuff, try the expensive stuff, because sometimes the really expensive stuff will not impress you. Now, I know there's going to be people say, "Why, Reg, I got guitars that have played that well." I'll give you a list of some of the good guitars I had. And a guitar that I really loved was the Epiphone Les Paul. I loved that thing. That thing was great. I bought that thing in Los Angeles just before you could get them up here in Canada. Back in '92, and it still said Gibson on headstock because Gibson had just acquired Epiphone. And that guitar, man, that thing, I had played probably 100 gigs with that thing. It paid itself off. $350. Fantastic guitar. It had sounded good. The pickups weren't quite as good as this, but it was a good sounding guitar, but it was reliable. It was played great. Fantastic guitar. When my Ibanez RG750 got stolen, that guitar was phenomenal. It was great with effects. It wasn't so great by just straight through the amp as much, but it was a good sounding guitar. But it was the idea that it had 5-way, 2 humbuckers and a single coil. It was basically a Steve Vai guitar, but with 6 strings instead of 7. It was basically, what the Gem was modeled after and what the Paul Gilbert guitar was modeled after. It was a very clean sounding guitar. You could really put a lot of effects on it. It still it was still clean notes coming out of it. Super jumbo frets, wizard neck. The thing just played so well. But the Ibanez had a really good tremolo system on it too. It was very smooth. You could do the cat pearls. This thing doesn't do the cat purrs as well as My Ibanez did. The guitar that replaced my RG750 was a really difficult guitar to find. I still couldn't, I was still at that point, well, I'll never afford an SG61 reissue, but, whatever, it's like maybe someday, right? And I look at the philosophy of a guitar different now, especially when you know you're going to stick with it. It's like, okay, this is a guitar, I'm not going to buy it and flip it in 2 months or whatever. These guitars, you buy them and you get sick of them. Maybe not sick of them, but the novelty wears off. And as soon as the novelty wears off, that's it. You never play it again. And it sits there collecting dust. And I had 5 guitars like that, and I priced them all. They were all about $400 a piece. $2,000, right? And I'm saying, why don't I have one of these? But what you're worried about is that you're going to get tired of one of these. You won't get tired of a good quality guitar. You won't. And if you have several good quality guitars, you'll still play. You'll still play them. You just don't get tired of them. This I don't get tired of because it has a purpose. Like there is a purpose to this. So the guitar that replaced my Ibanez RG750 is a guitar I really miss now. And I'll tell you what happened. It was a 1994 Hammer Diablo, and USA made, 24 fret, flat neck, rosewood fingerboard, alder body. I don't remember. I know they were Seymour Duncans. I don't know if they were Screaming Demons or Trembachers in there. Whatever they were just wow. It's such a great match, that guitar. Reverse headstock on it, beautiful emerald green. You see all the grains. It was one of the best sounding guitars I ever owned. And I didn't realize how good it was until I started buying cheap guitars after again. And what had happened to it is, from playing gigs and stuff like that, there was a couple of things that happened. Wear and tear on a guitar when you're playing gigs. We used to go to the singers, leave all our equipment at the singer's place. Now, in the wintertime, up here in Canada, it gets pretty cold. And we'd throw all the guitar cases in the back of his trunk, whatever. And he'd go home, and we'd go the other way, because then we wouldn't have to drive all the way out to the town of Bourget from Ottawa and stuff like that, which was, we'd go home. And then next week, we'd play again, we'd play another bar, whatever, a couple of bars, whatever it was. At one point, we were playing like 4 nights a week. And all of a sudden, I noticed my guitar was starting to get a weird buzz up at the upper, like my neck was warping. I was like, I couldn't figure out what was going on. And I found out later, and it was happening to my other guitar players too. I was like, what's going on? So one night, we stopped at his place, and he gets out of his car, and he walks in the house, and he goes, hey, are you going to bring the guitars in? He goes, no, I leave them in the trunk. Well, that's what happened. The moisture basically warped the neck. So, he didn't know. He didn't, it was like, that's what happened. So I had to raise the action up, and the guitar didn't play quite as well as it was. But I was able to live with it, kind of like what I'm doing with this now. But this still plays pretty darn good. Even with the neck slightly warped on this at the heel, it still plays better than this guitar. It just still plays naturally cleaner and better than this guitar, strangely as it is. But that's what happened to the Hammer Diablo. So I parked the Hammer Diablo in my closet for years, didn't pick it up, and I ended up buying all these. I can't even remember. I had an Epiphone G400. That was a great little starter guitar. Those things, those G400s, excellent starter guitar. That thing, I don't know how many gigs I did with that thing. I just got rid of it last year for like $60 or something like that. I wasn't using it, but it didn't owe me anything. And had an Artcore Ibanez. I do like Ibanez a lot. I'll probably get another one. But the thing is these were cheap guitars, and after the novelty, about a few weeks after buying them, the novelty started wearing off on them. It was just like, okay, it's cool, but it doesn't sound as good as my good guitars. So when I sold my Hammer Diablo, I plugged it in and tuned it up and everything like that. And I just played it straight through the amp, the way I normally test guitars. And I couldn't believe how good it sounded. I was just like, and I'm getting rid of this thing? I don't know what I was thinking. Well, I know what it was, because I didn't want to replace the neck on it and whatever. I should have. I really should have. But that guitar was just like, it sounded so good. So then when I sold it, it was just like I was missing that sound, like that really good sound. So then I ended up selling all the cheap guitars. And then I went out and I bought the SG3 because I couldn't find I didn't quite want to splurge for a brand new SG61 reissue. It was a little bit out of my price range. And And the SG3 came on the heels of a G1275 Epiphone, the double neck, which I love that guitar, and I do kind of regret selling that one as well, because that was a great set. That was a very professional sounding guitar. And again, at the time it was well under $1,000. Now they're like $1,500. But it was a 14-pound guitar. It was definitely a showstopper, and it had a lot of limitations on how high you could play on the neck. The 12-string on it was just incredible, but the 6-string you could only play really realistically up to the 19th fret, so it wasn't a real good shredder guitar. But as a rhythm guitar, that thing was just fantastic. And again, as a showstopper, I just loved playing it. I'd probably buy another one, but it's just and I had just that guitar for a long time too. That was a very professional guitar, but then when I bought the SG60, the SG3, again, sitting over there in the corner. You'll see that on the channel, so don't worry about it for now. But then after 2 years later, I picked up that. So now I got 2 like super guitars. So I've had 5 really incredible guitars out of the 40 guitars I've owned in my life. Most of the guitars I had were cheap. I had Strat copies. I had stuff I forgot. Like, I had to write it down one day, and I know I came up with the number 39 or 40 guitars. And that, I think, is guitar number 40. That's number 39. There were a few far between, but so the thing is I know when you're buying guitars, they are expensive. So if you want a good quality guitar, again, you got to place it, and sometimes you'd be surprised. Like that, there would be probably like an $800 quality guitar back in the 90s. That's how good it is. So for the money, it's really good. But you'll notice what I mean by things you have to live with. It's only when you play better guitars because the better guitars seem to, like, they're playing themselves. They just seem to get more out of you, and with less effort. And it's all nitpicking and splitting hairs. But to start off with something, not necessarily just cheaper, but play things whatever plays the best for the price range you got. And then we're sometimes buying a used guitar. When I saw this thing, I got it for, I don't remember, $1,400 or $1,600, and it was like, okay, that's a lot of money for a guitar when you're not gigging anymore, and it's something I want to get back into. And it's not the type of guitar you want to bring out on the stage unless you're making good money. It's not a jam night guitar at all. But you can, but you're going to ruin it. But it's one of those things that it's like, okay, like, I'm not going to buy this and then get sick and tired of it in like 2 months and never play it again. You know what I mean? You're going to be, this is a go-to guitar. This is a guitar you pick up all the time. And you will just find there's going to be guitars that you pick up that are just like that. And they're going to be good guitars because they serve what you need to do. So spending a lot of money on a guitar is not really a regret. It's spending money on guitars that you get tired of really quick. And I know it's cool to have a nice guitar rack full of guitars, but trust me, and I'm not lying to you, if you're going to buy a lot of cheap guitars, buy them used. So when you sell them, that you either get back what you paid for them, or you don't lose much. Because, the novelties on the cheap guitars will wear off. And you're always going to be wanting that slightly better guitar. So you buy 3 cheap guitars, you could have bought that one really good guitar, right from the get-go, So that's why I look at it. And also, too, with the good guitars, like I say, you don't flog them as quick. My Gibsons, like, it would take a lot for me to sell my 62 reissue. It'd have to be a pretty outstanding, it would probably be another Gibson SG of some sort for me. It's Stratocasters or whatever. But there's a lot of great guitars out there, so go into the shop, try everything on the wall. Like a guitar that I actually can't believe how much I like is the Kramer Pacer Sanchez model, or is it Sanchez or Satchel model or whatever, the Steel Panther one. I went and played that one last year, and I was just like, damn, that is one great sounding guitar. It was really, really good sounding, The Eddie Van Halen guitar that I played, the one with the white and black with the circles and the woman on it. That thing was really cool. Could I adjust the $1,200 for that guitar? I don't know. Kramer Beretta, that's a pretty cool guitar, but I don't know, for $1,000, I don't know. You know, some of the other guitars, the Yngwie guitar, that thing that's been a guitar that kind of rivals this. If I'm ever going to buy a Fender Stratocaster, it's an Yngwie, but an Yngwie guitar is like $1,800 to $2,300. So it's not a guitar you're going to be taking out to the jam nights, you know what I mean? And I'm pretty sure if you can find one used, you know, if you can find one used, maybe find one used for like $1,200. Okay, maybe you'll risk it. But some guitars become novelty guitars, and I'm one of those guys that I play the crap out of all my guitars. So I don't look at it from a point of view of, you know, is it going to make me money or whatever. It's something that when you play it, you can get out of it what you want to get out of it. What's that worth, you know? And also, too, when you have a really good guitar, you tend to play it more, which makes you a better guitar player, theoretically. You know, sometimes you hit a plateau and you just stay there. I mean, I'm pretty sure I'm not saying you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but I'm pretty sure my playing has hit a plateau. The only time I get better is when I start jamming with people, and I jam with people that are better than me. Then it's like, oh, I pick up little tricks from them, and whatever. So that's the only time I get better. Other than that, I just tend to play the same things over and over again. We all do that. But, I mean, I could play Paul Gilbert's type of stuff on the SG. I could play, you know, I was trying to remember some of the Nuno Betancourt type of extreme stuff and doing that on the SG. I could do that stuff. Play Sabbath on it. I could play Randy Rhoads on it. It's amazing what I could do with this guitar, and you wouldn't think you could get that out of it. It seems like I could get something out of the SGs that I couldn't get out of the Les Pauls, and that's why I guess I gravitated to it. But yeah, if I want to just twang on it like Angus Young, 3-chord rock, I can get that out of it too. Very cool. If I want to get Jimmy Page or Eric Clapton out of it, I can get that out of it too. Death metal stuff, it's not the guitar for it. But if you're the type of guy like me who plays straight through the amp, this is a phenomenal guitar. This guitar playing straight through the amp, it tends to like effects more than straight through the amp, but it actually is a pretty ballsy guitar straight through the amp. It's a little bit dry in tone because the pickups are just bland, but they're good pickups. They handle effects well. They're clean. Like, I mean, you can't over distort this guitar to the point where the pickups can't handle it. These you can. These pickups tend to go a bit microphonic at high volumes, but they still sound so good. But that's also what gives you the liveliness out of this guitar, especially with the 6L6 tubes in that deluxe there. What a match that is. What a match. It's just, yeah. So you want to play George Lynch, you can play George Lynch. Why? Because it's a guitar that you can just play anything on. You want to play, I don't know, flamenco, you can play flamenco with this guitar. It's just, it does everything. And it does it naturally. You know, like, it just seems like whatever style you pick, it's ready for the job. Some of the stuff, it just not quite ready for the job. It's almost ready for the job. It's not refined. But you can do it. It'll get the job done. You got to work for it a little bit more. So I know I'm going around in circles now, but it's just a, little tip for people getting into it. So buying a good quality guitar is, not necessarily just about price. It's about what you can get out of it. And when you do that, you won't have to buy 20 guitars. It's cool to have as many guitars as you can, but, there's also, once you have like 10 of them sitting there that you haven't touched in 4 years, you'll understand what I mean. There's guitars. Usually I like to have 2 on stage, 3 tops. I mean, it gets redundant. Like, how many backup guitars do you need, right? But do you have 2 cheap backup guitars? I mean, again, I played my expensive guitars live, and there's a price to pay for that. If it's a guitar you really, really love, you can find another, buy 2 of them. Because what'll happen is you're going to destroy one playing it live. It's just the heat, the sweat, the going into a hot bar coming out, the wear and tear of throwing it around in a guitar case. It wears, it does bad things to them. So there are some great gigging guitars too. There are some guitars that are a little more fragile. This is a little more of a fragile guitar. The SG3, I think, will be an excellent gigging guitar. It's built like the SG Standard, so it's pretty much like an SG Standard is an excellent. You can't break those things. Those things are, you draw, you can smack somebody in the face with it if they get too rowdy and start playing again. Like it's, the SG Standard is a pretty well built workhorse guitar, and plays great too. The modern guitars versus, like, this is a modern style guitar. This is more of a vintage style guitar. Whatever your style is, you're going to find that fixed bridge guitars are going to tend to play better for you. I mean, I got sick and tired of Floyd Roses years ago because almost all my guitars were Floyd Roses. But that's what put me onto my Les Paul years ago, and I loved it so much because it was just like, even if I broke a string, nobody noticed because the guitar would still stay in tune. Whereas you break a string on a floating bridge, it's just, trust me, you hear that one pretty quick. You better have your AB pedal hooked up. That's the way I do these guitars, is I hook them up to an AB pedal, and that way, if I break a string, I just grab the other, put one guitar down, grab the other guitar, and just tap it, and everything good to go. Yeah, so I guess I didn't expect to go on this long, but I thought it was a good topic for the day today, where it's kind of gloomy. So, yeah, there you go. So that's my tips for buying, cheap guitars versus expensive guitars. But don't look at it as cheap as versus expensive. Look at it more as quality and tool to the job versus novelty and expediency of just buying a cheap guitar. Yeah, there we go. So have yourselves a great day. Make sure you hit that like button too.